Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here today, and we are going to be discussing a topic that is, well, quite near and dear to my heart, and that is, are secondary builds still worth it, viable, whatever you want to call it, in World of Warships in 2020? And honestly, even though I'm a huge fan of secondaries, as you guys know, I can't answer this any other way other than in most cases, no. If you are not someone who just wants to brawl, and despite every direction the game's currently going in right now, you still want to brawl and get in those close quarters fights every opportunity you can, it's not worth it. But if you are one of those persons, like myself included, it's worth it. But for the majority of people that play this game, currently it's not worth it. Now, there were a couple of ships that you could go for secondary builds on. Obviously, there are ships in the game that are very, very obviously meant for secondary builds. And those are the only ships I would still say, yes, you can run a secondary build on those and still be okay today. If know what you're doing and you just want to brawl, you can use those ships. Ships like the Massachusetts, Ohio, Curve First, the entire German line, and Alsace. But on other ships that used to be able to kind of go in one way or the other, like the Republic, I guess you could put the Alsace in there as well. And Montana, people used to swear it up and down to me back in the day that they would run secondary build Montanas and it was great for it. Okay. That's why I'm throwing that one in there. And a couple other ships, too. Well, and again, we're mostly talking about battleships, obviously. Unless you're running a secondary build on, like, your frickin' Emerald or something. But, anyway. So, those ships that used to be, you could kind of go for a main battery build or an AA build or a secondary build, like the Republic. The Republic's a great example. Used to, I called it kind of modular because you could build it with the modules and the captain skills into being pretty decent at any one thing that you wanted it to be decent at. For example, mine's a hybrid main battery and secondary build, but not a full-on secondary build. And people, of course, would say, well, you should probably just dump everything to the primary guns now. And I would say, yeah, if I was an average player and I wasn't, too much into brawling like I am, I probably would dump all my stuff into the main battery of the Republic. And, that may be something I may have to start looking into. Like the Jean Bar. You can have a secondary build on the Jean Bar, but especially today, I would say go for the main battery and survivability. And that's the big thing now. Most battleships are running survivability builds because of the current meta. And I can't blame them for that. That's a pretty wise decision. I have a survivability build on Kremlin and Yami. And on Monty, I still have an AA build because Monty still does have really good AA. GK, secondary build, obviously. Conqueror, survivability. Ohio, secondary. And Republic, I already told you, main battery and secondary still. Now, that's just me because I refuse to give up brawling, even though the meta does not want me to do it anymore too often. And that's the thing. Even though I want to brawl and I try to get in situations where I can brawl, honestly, if I play 10 games, I might get into a good brawl in 4 of them. The rest of the games are, medium to long range now. Kind of hanging toward the back of the map. Teams are really passive. You really wait until you really have a huge advantage before you push anymore. And it's not like how World of Warships used to be when you could take 4 or 5 ships and just dive teeth first into another 4 or 5 enemy ships like it used to be back in the day when I first started playing. I guess just with all that's changed in the game, CV rework, the introduction of more rapid-firing HE spammy ships, Russian battleships, and kind of the power creep that's been going on with some of the newer ships versus some of the older ships. Teams are waiting for a bigger advantage to push now. And that's evident in, I believe, the GK clip you're seeing here, where I thought my team was going to back me up because I had the Smolensk sailing up next to me. I had a couple ships coming up behind me, and I go into the cap with the GK, and I helped take out a Montana, but because my team didn't follow up, I get knocked out. Thankfully, we do win that game. And, you know, that's the thing. Again, with secondary builds, even if you go for it, you aren't going to be able to utilize it as much as you would a survivability build. Now, for me, the thought of putting a survivability build on a GK is kind of just like, what? Because that is literally the whole purpose of the GK, is to brawl and to build out your secondaries. But people are doing it, and I know people are doing it because I'm having GKs who I approach them at like 8 kilometers and their secondaries haven't started going off yet, and I'm like, oh my god. Oh, and the Graf Zeppelin. Graf Zeppelin, obviously, put a secondary build on your Graf Zeppelin. What are you doing if you're not? But yeah, it's kind of sad because, as we all know, the German battleship dispersion buff was pretty much wargaming, admitting that, hey, we're not trying to get the engagement ranges any closer now. We are admitting that engagement ranges are now getting further and further away. Because I've said this before, when I started playing a couple years ago, they were trying so hard to get battleships to push in, and getting cruisers to push in, getting destroyers to push in. I don't know what changed in the devs' thinking, to where now it's like, okay, we're going for more of the mid to long range game now, with ships like Thunderer being introduced, and then we have Yashima coming out. Probably not pretty soon, probably, God knows, half a year to a year, and half a year is pretty optimistic as well for a ship with 20-inch guns that wasn't supposed to happen. But yeah, survivability builds on battleships are probably, if you're a new player, I would recommend that's the route that you go. Except on the Germans. The Germans, I still think that on the Germans you should still have a secondary build, because that's just, the ships are so designed around that. Their armor, and the thing is too, the Germans are the only nation that decide to put any actual armor on their secondaries as well. So while yes, a secondary build Alsace is still, not a terrible idea, its secondaries won't survive long. Between the amount of HE that you eat, because just facing facts, there's more shells of HE flying through the air now than they were when the Alsace first came out. You're going to lose a lot of secondaries that way. Same with bombs from planes and rockets from planes too. You're going to lose a lot of secondaries that way. So, yeah, the Alsace, you can still go for it. But even then, I would say maybe go for a main battery and survivability build in the Alsace nowadays, because it's just the way the game is now. But, yeah, it's honestly not worth it. If you're a new player, survivability is probably the way to go. Again, unless you want to go with the Germans. And again, Americans, I would recommend it. Russians, I would definitely recommend it because they're so good at it. British battleships, yeah, especially since they got their citadels raised. And, well, yeah, everything. I would recommend it on everything but the Germans and the Ohio. The Ohio still has really good secondaries, and, well, it has really good secondaries. It came out with really good secondaries, but it can still do well because it has that really fast cooldown on its heal and its damage con, so it can do just fine. And yes, of course, you could push that great damage con and heal even further with a survivability build. You could, but I still do think the Ohio's pretty good at getting into a fight, and the guns are large and accurate enough to where you can do good at mid to long ranges. The Kurfürst, even though they did buff the dispersion of the guns, it's still fairly hit or miss at longer ranges. It's a lot better than it used to be, let me tell you. But it's still just not, I still would say go secondary build on Kurfürst. I mean, people say Kurfürst is the worst tier 10 anyway. So, I mean, just screw the haters. Go with it. It's what I've been doing, and I still have great games in Kurfürst. And it's funny, too, because people who complain about how I play and just criticize me extremely, extremely harshly, they still go, oh, but you're pretty good in Kurfürst. It's like, okay, thanks. But, yeah, that's my opinion on that, and it was kind of hard to say that it's not worth it anymore. But, I mean, I used to have a secondary build on Yami, okay? I was that guy for a very long time. I had a secondary build on Yami because it's surprising how often Yamis, people just don't expect secondary build Yamis. So destroyers get a little bit closer than they should, and then that mountain of secondaries on the side opens up. I mean, they're not as good as German secondaries, but destroyer players, they just don't expect it. But I gave up on that and then went to a survivability build on Yami, so there's that. But yeah, kind of a sadder video to make. But again, if you're a newer player, just go for a survivability build. If you know what you're doing, then you know how you play. And it is kind of frustrating that most battleships are being forced into a survivability build now, because it kind of takes away the point of having different modules and different captain skills that you can kind of fit your ship to your playstyle, which, I mean, you still can, but in today's meta, not having a survivability build really hurts. It really, really, really hurts. And I get battleships are supposed to be tanking and all this stuff, but still, again, when I first started playing, you could, really mess around with the builds and stuff. And cruisers, of course, cruisers and destroyers, you can still, of course, do that for days now, but battleships, they're just kind of really being forced into that corner survivability build, which we'll see how some upcoming changes to the game affects this. And again, I'm not saying that it's, the Smolensk fault or CB's fault. I'm just saying that just the nature of the game today, most battleships are having to run survivability builds to survive the current meta. Alright guys, that's what I think on that subject. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We're on our way to 8,000 subscribers. And oh, also the stream last night. I don't know what happened. Streamlabs just disconnected from the stream. I tried to reconnect to YouTube, it wouldn't reconnect. I tried to reconnect to Twitch, it wouldn't even connect to Twitch, but my internet was fine. I don't know if it was Streamlabs or whatever screwed up, but I do apologize for that. And I do apologize for you guys that were waiting for me to get the stream back up. I just couldn't. I tried for like another 20 minutes and I just couldn't get it back up. But anyway guys, again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.